doing, everybody? Barry Knob here, welcoming you to another episode of VHSurfer. I've enjoyed watching a lot of the previous episodes, so I'm excited to do this. I'm a musician, audiovisual engineer, and producer. Most recently been doing a lot of work for the fantastic spoken arts label Cadaver Records, who are set to release a 6 LP box set of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. So anyone who's kind of into weird fiction or soundtrack stuff, definitely check them out. I live in the greater Philadelphia area with my wife and 14-month-old son. So I've been a collector for most of my life. It was mostly CDs growing up. Tapes and movies were generally just too expensive. I actually found this fairly recently, which I thought was interesting. A copy of Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon for $29.95 at Tower. So that was kind of the reality growing up, just kind of hard to amass any sort of cool collection, premium prices like that. But obviously with the advent of streaming, things becoming a little more affordable, picking up things along the way at thrift stores and flea markets was a lot easier to kind of start getting into collecting. I remember coming across this copy of The Deep, not necessarily even one of my favorite films, but just this awesome cover art, the original 1977 Columbia release in such like amazing condition. It was kind of one of the tapes that really spearheaded the whole VHS collecting thing for me. I'd say the majority of my collection was actually found in the wild. I don't really like to go online. Most people know what they have, so it's, you're paying premium prices at that point. So just the hunt, going out there, trying to find something really cool or unexpected, something you weren't really, looking for. It makes it that much more sweet to find it kind of out in the wild as opposed to just going online and paying $30 for a cool tape. Obviously for nostalgic purposes, being a child of the 80s, I grew up with tapes. I remember popping in the copy of Ghostbusters that my parents had recorded off the TV and probably watched it thousands of times, wore it out. In college, I worked at Blockbuster Video, and I feel like in general, our culture has been sorely missing, that kind of video store culture of going out and making an event of searching for the movie as opposed to just going online and scrolling through Netflix, which has got to be one of my least favorite things to do. And then just obviously, these are all kind of relics from a bygone era. Being a student of history, I enjoy kind of having these pieces that really connect us to our past. I collect all sorts of media for that reason, vinyl, cassette tapes, Blu-rays, DVDs. Of course, I have a soft spot for VHS, definitely my favorite. So I probably have somewhere in the ballpark of like 700 tapes. When I first started collecting, I would kind of just pick up a lot of common crap. I'm actually trying to thin it out a little bit. I planned on, going to flea markets and, trade shows and setting up tables and trying to kind of sell some of my stuff off. But obviously COVID hit and made it a little more difficult to do that. So, eventually I'll get out there and probably start maybe even doing some trades. Just trying to I'm a little more selective these days when it comes to picking up tapes. So it's kind of hard to figure out what my most prized tapes are. I kind of prize my whole collection. I did pick a few examples. My copy of Sleepaway Camp, definitely one of my most prized tapes. I remember watching this for the first time and just being completely blown away by it. Definitely one of my favorite slasher films, that amazing ending. Obviously you go online now and you see that it's pretty hard to come by, so pretty excited to have this in the collection. Another one, Reanimator. This is actually the original Vestron release. One of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. So really, really stoked to have a copy of this in the collection as well. I think I found this at a bookstore for like $1. So yeah, like I said, I have a lot of common stuff. So not a ton of rare stuff. That being said, I do have a couple things that I know are a little less common. For one, this copy of Hamburger, the movie. Pretty terrible 80s sex comedy. Fantastic cover. Looks like a bunch of people having an orgy inside of a hamburger. I know this was never released on DVD, probably for good reason. Features the NFL legend Dick Butkus as well. Yeah, Hamburger the movie, media release. Definitely one of the rarest tapes. This is definitely one of my rarest tapes too. my copy of Green Jello 333. Also one of my oldest tapes. I remember I probably bought this the day it came out. I was a huge fan of this band growing up. I think the label only made like 5,000 copies of this. Pretty fantastic to have it in the collection. I think also notably it was nominated for a Grammy Award for best long form music video or something, which is pretty funny considering the content within. Yeah, I know I saw in one of the earlier episodes Rob plays in the band. Pretty awesome. One of my favorite groups growing up, and definitely probably one of the rarest tapes I have for sure. Not sure if this one counts. This is my copy of Shaolin Death Squad. It's actually on beta. Again, I know this is a VHSurfer, not a beta show, but yeah, amazing cover, and I dare any of you to find a copy of this one. It's pretty hard to find. I mean, I can't even play it. I don't have a beta player. My Grail tape is a tape that I've actually already owned at one point. It's a movie called Black Roses. It's like an 80s metal horror film, kind of in the vein of like Trick or Treat. I remember picking it up somewhere, and it had this amazing 3D cover with like a guitar and a skull. Remember it being a pretty cool movie too, but I didn't have the same reverence for VHS tapes that I have now, so I probably just kind of left it sitting out. It either got stolen or lost in a move somewhere. I remember I actually recently checked online, and it was going for like 125 bucks, so probably gonna have to be something I either trade for or find out in the wild. Black Roses, would love to have a copy of that. So I'm always looking for slasher favorites, Slaughter High, Pieces, Slumber Party Massacre 1 and 2. You know, any of the kind of schlocky horror stuff that me and my buddies used to kind of go out to the video store to watch. Always on the lookout for that stuff. I also love collecting concert and music videos. I guess namely hard rock and heavy metal stuff, especially things that weren't ever released on DVD. Always on the lookout for that. This Megadeth and Soundgarden tape are just a couple examples of really cool tapes that I found that I know were never released on DVD, so psyched to have these. Definitely looking for more. So I'm not very actively involved in the online tape community. Pretty averse to social media in general these days. I do go on Twitter every now and then, but I don't have an Instagram or Facebook or anything. You know, just being a new dad, I'm trying to be kind of more present for my son, not just sitting there scrolling through social media all day. So it's obviously made it a little hard to connect with, you know, with the community. But, you know, that being said, one of my favorite things every year is going to the VHS Fest, which is also notable because it's organized by my old buddy Josh from Lunch Meat. We came up together in the South Jersey punk scene, both played in bands, so to kind of see him take this whole thing and build a VHS empire and become one of the preeminent VHS resources has been super exciting to watch, and kudos to you, Josh. Good job, man. Just knowing that, you know, VHS collectors are, you know, certainly like-minded individuals. Even just seeing the episode with Rob who plays in Green Jello and mentioning his love for that group growing up as a kid, like that totally mirrors myself. So just knowing that VHS community, you're likely to find some very you know, some kindred spirits. So yeah, like I mentioned, I pretty much have found everything out in the wild. I consider a lot of my tapes to be pretty cool. Some of the most notable ones, I remember being pretty excited finding this copy of UHF. One of my favorite all-time movies. Loved this movie growing up. Loved Weird Al. I feel like this is kind of very, you know, suitable for the VHS format as well. So it was a happy day finding this one, you know, for like $1. This awesome Road Warrior Clam, original Warner release. Awesome movie, even though Mel Gibson is an anti-Semitic weirdo. Still a sweet tape. And then I remember also coming across this media copy of Class of Nukem High. I was so excited when I found this, but I got home, popped the tape out, and it's Moments in Sports. So a little deflating when that happened. Always check the tapes. Still cool to have the cover as well. If anyone has a copy of the tape and doesn't have the cover, send it my way. Mostly on the lookout for classic 80s horror and slashers, stuff that I grew up watching with friends. Cool old sci-fi, action movies. Collect a lot of music tapes, concert videos. Mostly hard rock and metal. One thing I did want to say about music and concert tapes is that I have a pretty good sound system down here, nice receiver and speakers. And if you pop in one of these old concert tapes that's in pretty good condition and you crank it up, I mean, it sounds fantastic. It's, it's that same kind of analog warmth that you would, get from, a reel-to-reel or a vinyl record. Something I think is very underrated and not talked about often is how good VHS tapes can sound, considering they're still in pretty good condition. Another thing I collect quite a bit of is Disney clams. Now, I know it's not very cool or hip to collect very common Disney stuff, but my wife is a huge Disney fan, so, we enjoy kind of trying to find, Disney clams, especially ones we don't have whenever possible. We have pretty much every main Disney film on the VHS at this point, which is great, because then now when my son's old enough to start wanting to kind of watch some of these Disney movies, I don't have to pay for some Disney Plus subscription to watch Aladdin. I could just, pop in the tape. I don't think he's going to complain about the video quality not being HD. Always enjoy collecting random Disney stuff that I don't already have. And anything really just this kind of weird or esoteric or out of the ordinary these days. Used to buy a lot more common stuff, getting a lot more selective these days. I haven't really engaged in much trading. Like I said, I was going to start setting up some tables at flea markets and maybe even at the VHS Fest eventually. So I definitely would like to get into trading. Again, it's kind of hard to get into trading when I'm not actively involved in any of the kind of Instagram communities. That being said, if any of you do want to kind of trade or up for trading, I would definitely, love to. And, obviously always looking forward to meeting, fellow collectors. So the most recent, because of the pandemic, haven't really been going to flea markets or thrift stores. So the most recent pickups were actually at this year's VHS Fest. These awesome Priest tapes that I found. Fuel for Life and Priest Live. Got this from a guy who had a really cool Priest tattoo, and we talked about Judas Priest for like 15 minutes. Another awesome thing about, the tape community, like I said, finding like-minded individuals, and also Priest Forever, man. I found this copy of The Mangler out in the wild recently. It's, a Tobe Hooper film, certainly not regarded as one of the best, definitely not one of his best, but something I had never seen before. $2, I'll pick it up and check it out for sure. And when I popped it in the VCR, someone had, put a piece of tape over the little slit on the tape and had recorded boxing over top of The Mangler. So it was like some boxing match and HBO Sports thing that someone had copied over The Mangler. So obviously pretty bummed out, pretty disappointed. I went and found a copy online of The Mangler, downloaded it, and then hooked it into my VCR, put a piece of tape over the VHS, popped it in, recorded the digital version of The Mangler. So now I have a copy of The Mangler. It's not actually the tape version, but it is a copy of The Mangler nonetheless. Again, just a testament of what us VHS surfers will go through for our collections. So yeah, that's all I got for you today. I was kind of rambling on for a while. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk with all of you. I've enjoyed watching all your videos, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with all of you one day. So keep hunting, keep VHS alive, and until next time, see you later. Peace.